Wealthy woman's lie destroys a man's life. Now she must make it right. She had everything money could buy, but nothing money could fix, especially the lie that had destroyed an innocent man 7 years ago and now lived in her chest like a cancer, eating away at everything she pretended to be. Before the story begins, tell us where you are watching from in the comment section and hit that subscribe button. Now relax and enjoy the story. The crystal chandelier cast fractured rainbows across the marble floor of Victoria Ashford's penthouse, each shard of light as beautiful and cold as the woman who stood beneath it. She adjusted the diamond necklace at her throat, 3 carats that had once belonged to her grandmother, now feeling more like a noose than an heirloom. Mrs. Ashford, the caterers are asking about the wine selection. Her assistant, Margaret, approached with that practiced deference that money commanded but never earned. Victoria nodded absently, her gaze fixed on the Manhattan skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. 43 floors below, people rushed through their Friday evening routines, their lives urgent and messy and real. She envied them their chaos. "The Chateau Margaux for the main course," she murmured, though she knew she wouldn't taste a drop. Food had become cardboard, wine had become water, and conversation had become a performance she was growing tired of rehearsing. The penthouse buzzed with pre-event energy, florists arranging white orchids, servers in crisp uniforms setting up stations, musicians tuning instruments in the corner. Everything orchestrated to perfection, everything designed to impress. The annual Ashford Foundation Gala, where New York's elite would gather to write checks and feel good about themselves. Victoria's reflection caught her eye in the gilded mirror by the entrance. At 38, she was undeniably beautiful, auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, green eyes that photographers called striking, a figure maintained by personal trainers and carefully portioned meals. But she saw what the cameras couldn't capture. The hollowness behind her eyes, the way her smile had become a mask she couldn't remove. Her phone buzzed. A text from her husband Richard. "Flight delayed. Won't make it until midnight. Sorry, darling. Make my excuses." She stared at the message, feeling nothing. Richard had been making excuses for 3 years now, ever since his tech startup had exploded into a billion-dollar empire. Success had made him a stranger, just as wealth had made her a ghost in her own life. "Ma'am." Margaret's voice cut through her thoughts. "Your mother is on line 1. Victoria's jaw tightened. "Tell her I'm busy. She says it's about the anniversary." The anniversary. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she walked to her private study, closing the door behind her. She didn't need to look at the calendar to know what day it was. September 15th. 7 years since she'd spoken the words that had changed everything. Her study was her sanctuary. Leather-bound books she'd never read, awards from charities she'd never visited, photographs of a life that looked perfect from the outside. But it was the locked drawer in her mahogany desk that held her real truth. Inside, a yellowed newspaper clipping. Local contractor charged with theft, Ashford family presses charges. She'd read it so many times the paper had begun to tear at the creases. David Martinez, 34, married with 2 children. The accompanying photo showed a man with kind eyes and calloused hands, someone who looked like he'd never hurt a soul. Because he hadn't. The lie had slipped from her lips so easily that September morning, born from panic and self-preservation. She'd been desperate, cornered, and David had been convenient. A working-class man with no connections, no power, no voice that anyone would hear above hers. Victoria pulled out the clipping now, as she did every year on this date. The paper felt fragile between her fingers, like her conscience. She'd destroyed this man's life with a handful of words, and every day since had been a slow death by guilt. A knock at the door interrupted her spiral. "Mrs. Ashford? The first guests are arriving." She folded the clipping carefully and returned it to its prison. Time to perform again. Time to smile and laugh and pretend that her heart wasn't rotting inside her chest. David's world. 3 boroughs away, David Martinez swept sawdust from the concrete floor of his workshop, the familiar ritual bringing him the only peace he'd known in years. The scent of cedar and pine filled the small space, honest smells that reminded him there was still beauty in the world, even after everything. His workshop occupied the back corner of a converted warehouse in Queens, nothing fancy but clean and organized. Tools hung in perfect rows on pegboard walls, their handles worn smooth by his hands. A half-finished dining table dominated the center of the space, its surface sanded to silk and waiting for stain. David ran his palm across the wood, feeling for imperfections. At 41, his hands told the story of his life, scarred from accidents, calloused from work, but still steady and sure. These hands had built houses, crafted furniture, held his children when they were small. They'd also shaken uncontrollably in a courtroom 7 years ago while a jury decided his fate. The workshop door chimed as someone entered. David looked up to see Miguel Santos, his only employee and closest friend since the trial. "Heading out, Chief," Miguel said, hanging up his apron. "You working late again?" David nodded, not trusting his voice. September 15th always hit him like a physical blow, the anniversary of the day his life had been torn apart by lies he still couldn't understand. "You know," Miguel continued, his tone gentle, "Maria's making her famous tamales this weekend. You should come by. Bring some of that beer you like." "Maybe," David replied, though they both knew he wouldn't. Social gatherings felt like wearing clothes that didn't fit anymore. He'd learned to live in solitude, to find comfort in silence. After Miguel left, David locked the workshop and climbed the narrow stairs to his apartment above. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of a closet. The walls were bare except for a single photograph, his children, taken before everything fell apart. Elena, now 16, and Carlos, 14. They lived with their mother in California now, as far from their father's shame as she could take them. David heated leftover Chinese food in the microwave and sat at his small table, staring at the photograph. Elena had his eyes, Carlos had his stubborn chin. They called on birthdays and holidays, their voices polite and distant. They were good kids, but he'd become a stranger to them, a source of embarrassment they'd learned to explain away to friends. His phone sat silent on the counter. There was a time when it would ring constantly, contractors needing his crew, friends inviting him to barbecues, his wife calling to say she was running late. Now it served mainly as an alarm clock. The apartment felt smaller tonight, the walls pressing in with memories. He remembered the morning it all started, arriving at the Ashford mansion to fix a broken window, the same job he'd done dozens of times before. Mrs. Ashford had seemed nervous, distracted. He'd thought nothing of it, focused on his work like always. Then the police had come. Even now, David could taste the copper flavor of fear that had flooded his mouth when they'd said the words. "Theft, evidence, you're under arrest." He'd tried to explain, tried to tell them there had been some mistake, but rich people's words carried more weight than truth. The charges had been dropped eventually. Not enough evidence, the prosecutor had said. But the damage was done. His reputation was destroyed, his marriage couldn't survive the strain, and his construction business had collapsed like a house of cards. David pushed the food around his plate, no longer hungry. He'd rebuilt his life from nothing, slowly and carefully, like constructing a house on unstable ground. He had his workshop, his apartment, his routine. It wasn't much, but it was his. The photograph caught his eye again. Tomorrow he would volunteer at the community center, teaching woodworking to kids who reminded him of his own children. It was the only time he felt truly useful anymore, watching young hands learn to create something beautiful from raw wood. He cleaned his plate and prepared for bed, knowing sleep would be elusive. September 15th always brought the nightmares, courtrooms and handcuffs and the sound of his wife crying in the next room. But tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow he would lose himself in the honest work of teaching and creating. He didn't know that tomorrow, the woman who had destroyed his life would walk back into it, carrying 7 years of guilt and a desperate need for redemption that would change everything. Sometimes the heaviest chains are the ones we can't see. What do you think weighs more, guilt or resentment? Share your thoughts below. Victoria hadn't slept in 3 days. The gala had been a success by every measure that mattered to her world. $2 million raised, glowing coverage in the society pages, praise from the city's most influential donors. But success felt like ash in her mouth when she knew the truth about who she really was. She stood in her walk-in closet, surrounded by designer gowns and Italian shoes that cost more than most people's monthly salaries, and felt utterly naked. The newspaper clipping lay on her vanity table where she'd left it after the gala, a yellow accusation that seemed to pulse with its own malevolent life. "Mrs. Ashford?" Margaret's voice drifted through the bedroom door. "Your car is here for the board meeting." Victoria closed her eyes, pressing her palms against her temples. Another meeting, another performance, another day of pretending she deserved the respect her money commanded. She couldn't do it anymore. "Cancel it," she called back, her voice hoarse. "Ma'am, cancel everything. All of it. I need some time." She heard Margaret's heels clicking away, no doubt scrambling to make excuses for Victoria's sudden withdrawal from society. It would raise eyebrows, generate whispers, but Victoria found she no longer cared about maintaining her perfect facade. The clipping seemed to mock her from across the room. David Martinez. She'd memorized every detail of his face from that old photograph. The laugh lines around his eyes, the way his work shirt stretched across broad shoulders, the wedding ring that had probably been pawned years ago to pay legal fees. 7 years of silence, and what did she have to show for it? A loveless marriage, hollow friendships, and a foundation built on blood money from her father's empire. She'd spent her entire adult life running from the truth, and it had finally caught up with her. Victoria's hands shook as she reached for her phone. Her private investigator, Hamilton, answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Ashford, what can I do for you?" "I need you to find someone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "David Martinez. He used to live in the Bronx, worked in construction. There was some legal trouble about 7 years ago." Hamilton's silence stretched long enough to make her nervous. He was discreet, expensive, and had helped her navigate various social scandals over the years. But this was different. "Mrs. Ashford, are you sure about this? Sometimes the past is better left." "Find him," she interrupted. "I don't care what it costs." The hunt. Hamilton's report arrived the next morning, delivered by courier in a manila envelope that felt heavy with consequence. Victoria's hands trembled as she opened it, half hoping it would be empty, that David Martinez had disappeared into the ether like so many people did when life crushed them. Instead, she found a life laid bare in black and white. David Martinez, age 41, divorced, no criminal record beyond the dropped charges from 7 years ago. Current address, a workshop in Queens. Occupation, custom furniture maker. Volunteer work, Riverside Community Center, teaching woodworking to at-risk youth. The report included recent photographs, David working at a lathe, his face more weathered than she remembered but still kind. David laughing with a group of teenagers, his smile genuine in a way that made her chest ache. David alone in his workshop, surrounded by beautiful pieces of furniture that spoke of skill and patience and a soul that had somehow remained intact despite everything she'd done to destroy it. "At-risk youth," she whispered, the words cutting through her like shattered glass. He was helping kids who needed guidance, stability, hope. The same hope she'd stolen from him. Victoria called her driver without allowing herself time to reconsider. The ride to Queens felt like traveling to another planet, each mile carrying her further from the sanitized world of Manhattan's elite and deeper into the honest chaos of real life. The Riverside Community Center occupied a converted warehouse, its brick facade decorated with murals painted by local artists. Kids played basketball in the adjacent court, their laughter echoing off the walls. It was nothing like the sterile charity events Victoria usually attended. This was messy, authentic, alive. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, watching through tinted windows as people came and went. Parents dropping off children, teenagers clustered around the entrance, elderly volunteers carrying boxes of supplies. This was David's world now, and she was about to invade it like a virus. A group of kids emerged from the building, chattering excitedly about something. Behind them walked a man Victoria recognized despite the years that had passed. David Martinez, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, his hair grayer at the temples, but his posture still proud. He was talking to a young girl, maybe 13, who carried a small wooden box. Even from a distance, Victoria could see the care he'd put into teaching her, the way his hands moved as he explained something about the joinery. This was a man who still believed in building things, in creating beauty, in nurturing potential. This was the man she'd tried to destroy. The confrontation. Victoria's legs felt unsteady as she stepped out of the car. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant cooking. She'd dressed down for this encounter, simple black slacks and a cashmere sweater, but she still felt like an alien in designer shoes. David was saying goodbye to the last of his students when she approached. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the way his hands bore the honest scars of his trade. He looked up as she drew near, and she watched his expression shift from polite curiosity to confusion to something much darker. "Excuse me," she began, her voice catching. "Are you David Martinez?" He straightened, his body language immediately defensive. "Who's asking?" "I'm." She swallowed hard, tasting copper. "I'm Victoria Ashford." The change in his face was immediate and devastating. Color drained from his cheeks, his jaw tightened, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment, she thought he might strike her, and she realized she almost wanted him to. "What the hell are you doing here?" His voice was low, dangerous, vibrating with 7 years of suppressed rage. "I need to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about." He turned away, but she caught his arm. The contact sent electricity through both of them, not attraction but recognition. Predator and prey, destroyer and victim, finally face to face. "David, please. I know you have no reason to listen to me, but—" "No reason." He spun back, and she saw the full force of his fury. "You destroyed my life. You lied to the police, had me arrested, ruined my reputation, cost me my marriage, my business, my children. And you think I have no reason to hate you?" The words hit her like physical blows. She'd known the damage she'd caused in abstract terms, but hearing it from his lips made it real in a way that stole her breath. "I know," she whispered. "I know what I did to you." "Do you? Do you really?" He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of wood shavings and honest sweat. "Do you know what it's like to have your kids look at you like you're a stranger? To have your wife pack her bags because she can't stand the whispers? To lose everything you've built because some rich woman decided you were expendable?" Tears she'd been holding back for 7 years finally spilled over. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, David. I came here to..." "To what? Ease your conscience? Write me a check and call it even." His laugh was bitter as winter wind. "You think money can fix what you broke?" "No," she said, her voice stronger now. "I think you deserve the truth. I think you deserve to know why I did it, and I think you deserve to hear me say that I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong." David stared at her for a long moment, his chest rising and falling with barely controlled emotion. Around them, the community center had grown quiet, as if the very air was holding its breath. "The truth," he repeated, his voice hollow. 7 years later, now you want to tell the truth." "I was scared," Victoria began, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I was in trouble, and I panicked, and you were there, and I thought no one would believe your word over mine. Because I was nobody," David said quietly. "Just some contractor who didn't matter." "Yes," she whispered, and the admission felt like swallowing glass. "And I was wrong. I was so wrong, David. You weren't nobody. You were a father, a husband, a man with a life and dreams and people who loved you. And I destroyed all of that because I was too much of a coward to face the consequences of my own actions." The silence stretched between them, heavy with pain and possibility. Victoria could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of 7 years pressing down on her shoulders. "What do you want from me?" David asked finally. "I want to make it right," she said. "I don't know how, but I want to try. I want to clear your name, publicly. I want to tell the truth about what really happened." David's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features. "And what really happened, Victoria? What were you so afraid of that you were willing to destroy an innocent man?" She opened her mouth to answer, but the words stuck in her throat. The truth was complicated, messy, tied up in family secrets and personal shame that she'd never spoken aloud. But she owed him honesty, even if it destroyed what little remained of her reputation. "My father," she began, then stopped. "It's complicated." "I've got time," David said, his voice hard. 7 years' worth of time. Victoria looked around at the community center, at the place where David had rebuilt some semblance of purpose from the wreckage of his old life. She thought of the kids he taught, the furniture he created, the quiet dignity he'd maintained despite everything she'd done to him. "Not here," she said. "This place is too good for the story I need to tell you. But I'll tell you everything, David. Every ugly detail. And then maybe we can figure out how to move forward." David studied her face for a long moment, searching for deception, for manipulation, for the entitled rich woman who had casually destroyed his life. Instead, he saw something that surprised him, genuine remorse, and beneath that, a pain that might have been deeper than his own. "Tomorrow," he said finally. "There's a diner on Northern Boulevard, Mickey's. 7 a.m. You want to tell me the truth? Start there." Victoria nodded, relief and terror warring in her chest. "I'll be there." David turned and walked away without another word, leaving her standing alone in the parking lot as the sun set over Queens. She'd taken the first step toward redemption, but she knew the hardest part was yet to come. The truth had a way of changing everything, and tomorrow she would have to face the full weight of what she'd done, and what she was finally ready to do about it. When someone destroys your life with lies, can you ever truly forgive them? Or does some damage cut too deep to heal? What would you do in David's shoes? Share your thoughts below. Victoria hadn't returned to her penthouse. Instead, she sat in her car outside Mickey's diner until well past midnight, staring at the neon sign that flickered intermittently, casting red shadows across her windshield. The diner was closed, but she needed to see the place where she would finally tell the truth, all of it. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Richard, wondering where she was. Margaret, panicking about canceled appointments. Her mother, demanding to know why she'd missed their weekly lunch. Victoria turned the phone off and let the silence embrace her. At 3 a.m., she drove to a nearby hotel. Nothing fancy, just a clean room where she could think without the weight of her father's portrait staring down at her from the penthouse walls. She lay on the scratchy comforter, fully clothed, and tried to find the words to explain 7 years of cowardice. The memory played in her mind like a broken film reel, the same scene over and over. September 15th, 7 years ago. She'd been in her father's study, desperate and cornered, when David Martinez had arrived to fix the broken window. The sound of his truck pulling up had been like salvation, or damnation, depending on how you looked at it. Her father, Harrison Ashford, had been dead for 3 months by then, but his crimes were very much alive. The FBI had been circling, following a paper trail that led straight to the Ashford Foundation. Money laundering, tax evasion, connections to organized crime. Her father had built his empire on blood and buried bodies, and Victoria had been his unwitting accomplice. The $50,000 in cash had been sitting on her father's desk, payment for services she didn't want to think about. When the agents had shown up unexpectedly, she'd panicked, shoved the money into the toolbox of the nearest scapegoat, David Martinez, a man whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, lying in a hotel room that smelled of industrial disinfectant and other people's sorrows, Victoria finally understood the full weight of what she'd done. She hadn't just destroyed David's life. She'd saved herself by sacrificing an innocent man, and the knowledge had been eating her alive ever since. David's rage. David didn't sleep either. He paced his small apartment like a caged animal, his hands alternating between fists and open palms, his mind cycling through 7 years of suppressed fury. Victoria Ashford. The name had been carved into his heart with a rusty blade, and seeing her face again had reopened wounds he'd thought were healed. The way she'd looked at him, with those guilty green eyes and trembling hands, had made him want to shake her until she understood what she'd stolen from him. He pulled out his phone and stared at the contact labeled Elena, his daughter. 16 years old now, probably doing homework or texting friends or living the life of a normal teenager 3,000 miles away. He'd missed so much. First steps into high school, first heartbreak, the daily moments that made up a parent's real treasure. His finger hovered over the call button. What would he say? "Hi, sweetheart, guess what? The woman who destroyed our family wants to make things right now. 7 years too late, but hey, better late than never." He set the phone down without calling. Elena and Carlos had built lives without him, and he wouldn't disrupt their peace for his own need for validation. That was the cruelest part of Victoria's crime. It wasn't just about him anymore. The ripple effects had spread so far that even redemption felt selfish. Miguel knocked on his door at 6 a.m., holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing his most serious expression. "Jeef, you look like hell." "Feel like it too," David admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Want to tell me what happened yesterday? You left the center like your hair was on fire." David considered lying, deflecting, changing the subject. But Miguel had been there through the worst of it, had helped him rebuild when everything fell apart. He deserved the truth. "She came to see me," David said. "Victoria Ashford. The woman who had me arrested." Miguel's coffee mug stopped halfway to his lips. Dios mío. What did she want? To apologize. To tell me the truth about why she did it. And you believe her? David stared out his window at the slowly brightening sky. "I don't know what to believe anymore." She looked broken. Like she's been carrying this around as long as I have. "Broken doesn't fix what she did to you," Miguel said quietly. "Broken doesn't give you back your kids, your marriage, your business." "No," David agreed. "But maybe it's something." Miguel studied his friend's face. "You're going to meet with her." "Yeah, this morning. And I don't know if I want to forgive her or strangle her." "Maybe both," Miguel said. "That's allowed, you know. Hate and forgiveness can live in the same heart." The diner. Mickey's Diner was exactly the kind of place Victoria had never set foot in. Red vinyl booths, checkered linoleum, the smell of bacon grease and honest coffee. She arrived early, choosing a corner booth where she could watch the door, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that had seen better decades. David walked in at exactly 7 a.m., his hair damp from a recent shower, wearing clean jeans and a button-down shirt that had been pressed, but not professionally. He looked like a man preparing for battle, and Victoria realized that's exactly what this was. He slid into the booth across from her, his movements careful and controlled. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and tired feet, appeared immediately. "Coffee, hon." "Please," David said. "And whatever breakfast special will keep me from passing out." "Make it 2, Victoria added, though she doubted she could eat anything. When they were alone, David leaned back in his seat and studied her face. "You look different," he said finally. "Different how?" "Smaller. Like you've been carrying something heavy for a long time." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "I have been. The weight of what I did to you." "Tell me," David said, his voice flat. "Start from the beginning. What were you so afraid of that you were willing to destroy my life?" Victoria stared into her coffee, seeing her father's face in the dark liquid. "My father was a criminal," she said quietly. "I didn't know it at the time, or I didn't want to know it. The Ashford Foundation, all our wealth, it was built on laundered money. Connections to organized crime, tax evasion, things that would have sent him to prison for life." David's expression didn't change, but she saw his hands tighten around his coffee mug. "When he died, I inherited everything. The foundation, the companies, the secrets. I thought I could just ignore it, pretend it wasn't real. But the FBI doesn't give up that easily. So you decided to throw me under the bus," David said. "There was money," Victoria continued, her voice barely above a whisper. $50,000 in cash, sitting on my father's desk. Payment for something I didn't want to think about. When the agents showed up unexpectedly, I panicked. I shoved it into your toolbox and told them you'd been acting suspicious." The words hung in the air between them like a toxic cloud. David's face had gone pale, and Victoria could see the muscles in his jaw working. $50,000, he repeated. "You destroyed my life over $50,000. "I was terrified," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought if they connected me to my father's crimes, I'd lose everything. I'd go to prison. I'd become nothing. So you made me nothing instead." "Yes," she whispered, "and I've regretted it every day since." David was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. "Do you know what $50,000 would have meant to me back then? It would have paid for my kids' college funds. It would have kept my business afloat during the slow months. It would have been a year of security for my family." "I know." "No, you don't," David said, his composure finally cracking. "You have no idea what you took from me. I didn't just lose my reputation. I lost my identity. I lost the ability to look at myself in the mirror without seeing a failure. I lost my children's respect, my wife's trust, my own sense of worth. I want to make it right," Victoria said desperately. "I want to tell the truth publicly, clear your name, give you back." "Give me back what?" David's voice rose, causing other diners to look in their direction. "Give me back 7 years with my kids? Give me back my marriage? Give me back the nights I didn't lie awake wondering if I was actually guilty of something I couldn't remember." Victoria flinched as if he'd struck her. I can't give you back the time, but I can give you back your reputation. I can make sure everyone knows you were innocent. And what about you? David demanded. What happens to precious Victoria Ashford when the truth comes out? Do you go to prison? Do you lose your precious society friends? Do you face any real consequences at all? The question hit her like a physical blow because she'd been asking herself the same thing. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe. Probably. The statute of limitations might have run out on some of my father's crimes, but there might be charges for the cover-up, for what I did to you. Good, David said savagely. Good. You should face consequences. You should lose something that matters to you. They sat in silence as their breakfast arrived, neither touching the food. Victoria could feel the weight of David's anger pressing down on her, and she realized that confession wasn't absolution. Truth wasn't automatically forgiveness. I can't do this, David said finally, starting to stand. I can't sit here and listen to you justify what you did. 7 years, Victoria. 7 years of hell because you were too much of a coward to face your father's crimes. Wait, Victoria said, reaching across the table. Please. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I'm going to tell the truth regardless. With or without your blessing. I'm going to clear your name. David paused, studying her face. Why? What's in it for you? Nothing, Victoria said. Everything. I don't know. I just know I can't live with this anymore. I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not while you pay the price for my cowardice. And if I say no? If I tell you to leave me alone and never contact me again? Victoria's heart clenched. Then I'll respect that. But I'll still tell the truth. You deserve to have your name cleared, even if you never want to see me again. David stood there for a long moment, torn between the rage that had sustained him for 7 years and something else. Something that might have been hope, or might have been exhaustion. I need time, he said finally. I need to think about this. Of course, Victoria said. Take all the time you need. David walked away without another word, leaving Victoria alone with cold coffee and the weight of her confession. She'd told the truth, but she was beginning to understand that truth was just the beginning. The real work, the work of redemption, was going to be much harder than she'd imagined. Outside, David sat in his truck for 20 minutes, his hands shaking with residual anger and something else he couldn't name. Victoria Ashford had just handed him everything he'd wanted for 7 years, the truth, an apology, the promise of vindication. So why did it feel like another kind of loss? Sometimes the truth hurts more than the lies that came before it. When someone finally confesses to destroying your life, does it make the pain better or worse? What do you think David should do? Share your thoughts below. 3 days after their confrontation at Mickey's diner, David was trying to lose himself in the familiar rhythm of teaching when the world shifted beneath his feet once again. He was guiding 15-year-old Marcus through a mortise and tenon joint when Elena Rodriguez, the community center's director, burst through the workshop door with tears streaming down her face. David, thank God you're here, she gasped, clutching a letter that trembled in her hands. We got the notice. The city's shutting us down. The chisel slipped from David's hands, clattering to the floor. Around him, a dozen kids looked up from their projects, their faces shifting from curiosity to concern as they registered Elena's distress. What do you mean, shutting down? David asked, though his stomach was already sinking. Budget cuts, Elena said, sinking into a chair. The city council voted last night. They're pulling our funding effective immediately. We have 30 days to clear out. The workshop fell silent, except for the distant sound of a basketball bouncing in the gym. David looked around at the faces of his students. Kids like Marcus who'd found purpose in creating something beautiful. Kids like Jessica who'd stopped cutting herself because she'd discovered she was good at carving. Kids like Tommy who'd channeled his anger into building birdhouses instead of breaking windows. There has to be something we can do, Marcus said, his voice cracking. This place saved my life. David knew the feeling. The community center had saved his life too, given him purpose when everything else had been stripped away. Without it, he'd be just another broken man counting down the days until death. We'll figure something out, David said, though he had no idea how. We always do. But as Elena read the eviction notice aloud, David realized they were facing something bigger than a funding crisis. The building was being sold to a development company that planned to tear it down and build luxury condos. It wasn't just about money. It was about displacement, about erasing the last safe space these kids had. Victoria's guilt and opportunity. Victoria learned about the community center's crisis the way she learned about most things, through money. Her financial advisor, Robert Chin, mentioned it during their monthly meeting, a footnote in his report about development opportunities in Queens. The Riverside Community Center is being evicted, he said, scrolling through his tablet. Prime real estate, actually. Harborview Development is planning a luxury complex. Might be worth looking into if you're interested in diversifying your portfolio. Victoria's blood turned to ice. What kind of community center? Oh, the usual. After-school programs, sports leagues, some kind of woodworking program. Nothing fancy. The building's been there for decades, but the land value has skyrocketed with all the gentrification. Victoria's hands gripped her coffee cup so tightly she thought it might shatter. The woodworking program. David's program. The place where he'd rebuilt his life, where he taught kids to create beauty from raw materials, where he'd found meaning in the wreckage of everything she'd destroyed. I need to make a call, she said, standing abruptly. Mrs. Ashford, are you all right? But Victoria was already walking away, her mind racing. She'd promised David she would clear his name, but what if she could do more? What if she could save the one thing that mattered to him now? Her first call was to Hamilton, her private investigator. I need everything you can find on Harborview Development. Financial records, connections, anything that might give me leverage. Her second call was to her lawyer. I want to make an anonymous donation. A large one. And I need it done immediately. Her third call was to Robert Chin. That community center you mentioned? I want to buy the building. Today. The mysterious benefactor. David was helping the kids pack up their projects when Elena burst into the workshop again, this time with a smile that could have powered the entire building. David, you're not going to believe this. We got a call from the city. Someone made a donation. A huge donation. Enough to buy the building outright and fund our operations for the next 10 years. David's hands stilled on the wooden box he was wrapping. How much? $5 million, Elena said, her voice filled with wonder. Anonymous donor. The lawyer wouldn't give any details, just said it was someone who believed in our mission. Around them, the kids erupted in cheers and celebration. Marcus hugged his half-finished jewelry box like it was made of gold. Jessica started crying, happy tears for once. Tommy actually smiled, which was something David hadn't seen in months. But David felt a different kind of emotion rising in his chest. $5 million. Anonymous donor. The timing was too convenient, too perfect. And there was only one person he knew who had that kind of money and reason to feel guilty. There's a condition, Elena continued. The donor wants to remain anonymous, but they've requested that all major decisions about the center go through a community board. They're sending a representative to help with the transition. When? David asked, though he already knew the answer. Tomorrow. Some socialite who does charity work. Victoria something. David closed his eyes and counted to 10. Even when she was trying to help, Victoria Ashford was inserting herself into his life. He couldn't escape her, couldn't heal from what she'd done, because she kept showing up like a wound that wouldn't close. I need some air, he said. The confrontation, round 2. Victoria arrived at the community center the next morning dressed in what she hoped was approachable clothing, dark jeans, a simple sweater, minimal jewelry. She'd practiced her speech in the mirror, rehearsed explanations for why she was there, prepared for David's inevitable anger. What she wasn't prepared for was the sight of him emerging from the building as she approached, his face set in stone. You bought the building, he said without preamble. I made a donation, Victoria replied. Anonymous. $5 million, David said. You think you can buy your way out of what you did to me? I think I can prevent these kids from losing the one stable thing in their lives, Victoria shot back. I think I can save something that matters to you. Without asking me first. Without consulting me. You just swooped in with your checkbook and decided what was best for everyone. Victoria felt her temper flare. Would you rather I let them tear it down? Would you rather watch these kids lose their safe space because you're too proud to accept help? I'd rather you leave me alone, David said. I'd rather you stop trying to ease your conscience by throwing money at the problems you created. This isn't about my conscience, Victoria said, though they both knew it was, at least partly. This is about those kids in there who need this place. This is about the fact that you've built something beautiful here, and I won't let anyone destroy it. David stared at her for a long moment, and Victoria saw something shift in his expression. Not forgiveness, but maybe understanding. The board wants me to work with you, he said finally, to help coordinate the transition. And I hate the idea. I hate that I need your money. I hate that you're going to be here, in my space, reminding me every day of what you did. He paused, his jaw working. But I hate the idea of these kids losing their home even more. Victoria nodded, relief flooding through her. So we work together. Just until the transition is complete. Just until the transition is complete, David agreed. And then you disappear from my life forever. If that's what you want. It is. But as they stood there in the morning sunlight, both of them knew it wouldn't be that simple. Money had tied them together now, creating an obligation that neither could easily walk away from. They were bound by guilt and circumstance, by the needs of the kids inside that building, by the complicated mathematics of redemption. The first day, working together was harder than either of them had anticipated. Victoria, for all her good intentions, had no idea how a community center actually functioned. She approached it like a business acquisition, talking about efficiency metrics and strategic planning, while David tried to explain that some things couldn't be measured in spreadsheets. We need to maximize the use of space, Victoria said, studying the building layout. This corner here, we could fit in another classroom. That's where the kids go when they need to cool down, David replied patiently. Sometimes they need space to be alone, to process things. You can't schedule emotional breakthroughs. But from a utilization standpoint. Victoria, David interrupted, and she was surprised by the gentleness in his voice. These kids aren't numbers on a balance sheet. They're human beings with trauma and hope and dreams. The inefficient spaces are often the most important ones. Victoria looked around at the corner he'd indicated, a small alcove with a single chair and a window that looked out onto the basketball court. It seemed empty, wasted. But as she watched, a young girl slipped into the space, curled up in the chair, and pulled out a book. She looked peaceful, safe. I have a lot to learn, Victoria admitted. Yeah, David said. You do. They spent the morning touring the facility, David explaining the programs while Victoria took notes. She met the kids, some shy, some boisterous, all clearly devoted to David. She saw the way they looked at him, with respect and affection that she'd never earned from anyone. Mr. D saved my life, Marcus told her when David was out of earshot. He taught me that I was good at something, that I could make things instead of breaking them. He's the best teacher ever, added Jessica. He never yells, even when we mess up. He just shows us how to fix it. Victoria watched David work with the kids, his patience infinite, his praise genuine. This was the man she'd tried to destroy, and somehow he'd become better than he'd been before. The injustice of it made her chest ache. The unexpected moment. Late in the afternoon, while they were reviewing budget projections in Elena's office, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Through the window, Victoria saw a group of teenagers surrounding a smaller boy, their voices raised in anger. David was on his feet and moving before Victoria could blink. She followed him into the hallway, where he was already separating the kids with calm authority. Tommy, what's going on? He asked the boy in the center of the conflict. They're saying my dad's a drunk, Tommy said, his voice shaking with rage. They're saying that's why my mom left. And what did you want to do about it? David asked. I wanted to punch Luis in the face, Tommy admitted. Okay, David said. That's honest. And how would that help? Tommy considered the question seriously. It wouldn't. It would just get me kicked out of here. Right. So what are some other options? Victoria watched, fascinated, as David guided the boy through his emotions without judgment, helping him find solutions instead of just punishment. The other kids listened too, learning not just conflict resolution, but emotional intelligence. You could build something, Jessica suggested. Channel the anger into the wood. Or write about it, Marcus added. Sometimes writing helps me process stuff. Or you could just tell us you're hurting, David said gently. We're all here because we've been hurt. There's no shame in it. Tommy nodded, his shoulders relaxing. Can I work on my project? The jewelry box for my mom. Of course, David said. Let's all get back to work. As the kids dispersed, Victoria found herself staring at David with something that might have been awe. How do you do that? Do what? Make them feel safe. Help them process their emotions without falling apart. David was quiet for a moment. I learned the hard way that anger is just pain wearing a mask. These kids have been hurt by adults who were supposed to protect them. I can't take away their pain, but I can show them they're not alone in it. Even after everything you've been through, Victoria said softly, even after what I did to you, you still have compassion for broken people. David looked at her, and for the first time since their reunion, she saw something other than anger in his eyes. We're all broken, Victoria. The question is what we do with the pieces. Standing there in the hallway of the community center, surrounded by the sound of kids learning and creating and healing, Victoria realized something that changed everything. She wasn't just trying to ease her guilt or buy her way out of consequences. She was falling in love, not with David, not yet, but with the world he'd built, the hope he'd created, the man he'd become despite everything she'd done to destroy him. And that realization terrified her more than any FBI investigation ever could. When someone you've wronged turns out to be a better person than you ever were, does it make your guilt worse or inspire you to change? Can proximity heal old wounds or just make them hurt more? What do you think Victoria is really learning about herself? Share your thoughts below. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of the community center workshop, casting long shadows across the scattered wood shavings. Victoria arrived early, hoping to avoid the awkward small talk that had become routine over the past 2 weeks. She'd grown comfortable in this space, too comfortable, perhaps. The smell of sawdust and the rhythmic sounds of sanding had become oddly soothing, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of her penthouse. She was arranging supplies when David's voice cut through the quiet. Why do you really do this? Victoria's hands stilled on the sandpaper she'd been organizing. She hadn't heard him enter. Do what? Come here. Day after day. You don't need the tax write-off. You've got enough money to fund 1,000 centers without breaking a sweat. His voice carried none of the explosive anger from their first encounter, but something harder, a weary suspicion that made her stomach clench. She turned slowly, finding him leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. The morning light caught the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of more than just age. 7 years. 7 years of lines she'd helped carve there. I told you. I want to help. Bullshit. The word was quiet, matter of fact. Rich people don't spend their mornings teaching kids how to use sanders unless they're running from something. Or toward something. So which is it? Victoria's carefully constructed composure began to crack. Does it matter? The center gets funded, the kids get help. It matters to me. David stepped into the workshop, closing the door behind him. Because I've seen that look before. That haunted look you get when you think nobody's watching. I've seen it in the mirror for years. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria felt her breath catch, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it, the moment she'd been both dreading and craving. The moment when pretense would finally crumble. She started, then stopped. The lie she'd been living for 7 years pressed against her throat like a physical weight. I can't. Can't what? Can't tell you. Can't. God, I can't even look at you most days without feeling like I'm going to be sick. David's expression shifted, confusion replacing suspicion. What the hell are you talking about? Victoria sank onto one of the workshop stools, her expensive clothes looking absurd among the rough wood and metal tools. Do you remember the Ashford estate? Upper East Side. About 7 years ago. She watched his face carefully, saw the exact moment recognition flickered in his eyes. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You worked there, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. For my father's company. You were doing work on the library. Installing custom shelving. David went very still. Victoria Ashford. It wasn't a question. The way he said her name, like it tasted bitter, made her flinch. You remember. I remember. His voice was flat now, dangerous. I remember everything about that job. Every goddamn detail. Victoria's hands were shaking. She clasped them together, trying to still the tremor. Then you remember what happened. What I said happened. You said I stole from you. Each word was precise, controlled. $5,000 in cash from a jewelry box in your bedroom. You said you saw me coming out of there with it. I lied. The words fell between them like a stone into still water, sending ripples of tension through the small room. David didn't react immediately, just stared at her with those dark eyes that had haunted her dreams for years. What did you say? I lied. Her voice was stronger now, though tears were spilling down her cheeks. I lied about everything. You never stole anything. You never even went into my room. God, I can barely stand to think about it, but I took the money myself. I was desperate, and I took it, and when my father found out it was missing, You blamed me. I blamed you. The admission felt like swallowing glass. I was scared and stupid, and I knew you were just the handyman, that nobody would believe your word over mine, and David's hand slammed against the workbench, making her jump. Tools rattled, and a chisel clattered to the floor. But when she looked up, she saw something worse than anger in his face. She saw devastation. Do you know what happened to me? His voice was barely controlled. Do you have any idea what your lie cost me? Victoria shook her head, though she'd imagined it countless times. I tried to find out, but you were too much of a coward to face it. He turned away from her, running his hands through his hair. Maria left me. My wife of 8 years walked out because she couldn't stand being married to a thief. Said she'd never be able to trust me again, never be able to look at me without wondering what else I'd lied about. Victoria's breath caught. David, I lost my business. 23 employees gone. Nobody wants to hire a contractor who steals from clients. Word spreads fast in this business. I went from running a successful company to begging for day labor jobs. Each word was a hammer blow. Victoria felt like she might vomit. I lost my house. Had to move in with my brother's family for 6 months while I tried to figure out how to start over. My daughter was 12. Do you know what it's like to have your 12-year-old daughter look at you and wonder if her father is a criminal? Please. I thought about killing myself. The words stopped Victoria cold. For about 6 months there, I thought about it every day. Maria had taken Isabel and moved to California. I was washing dishes in a restaurant kitchen, sleeping on my brother's couch, and every morning I'd wake up and think about how much easier it would be to just stop. Victoria was sobbing now, ugly, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything. David's voice was hollow. Sorry doesn't give me back my marriage, my daughter's respect, my business, 7 years of my life. I know. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. I know it doesn't. But I had to tell you. I couldn't keep living with it. So this is about making yourself feel better? No. The word came out sharper than she intended. No, it's not. It's about trying to make it right. Somehow. David laughed, but there was no humor in it. Make it right. How exactly do you plan to do that, Victoria? How do you make right 7 years of hell? She had no answer. She'd been asking herself the same question for months, and she still didn't know. Why did you need the money? David asked suddenly. $5,000. Pocket change for someone like you. Victoria's composure, already fragile, cracked completely. My father. What about him? He was hitting me. Had been for years. And my mother, she'd killed herself the year before, and I was trapped in that house with him, and I was saving money to run away. I'd been taking small amounts from petty cash from his wallet, anywhere I could, and I'd almost had enough to disappear. David's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained hard. So you destroyed my life to save yours. I was 22 years old. The words came out in a rush. I was terrified and desperate, and I thought it would just be a minor thing. I thought maybe you'd get fired, maybe it would be uncomfortable, but I didn't think. You didn't think about me at all. No. The admission was barely a whisper. I didn't think about you at all. You were just there. Available. And I needed someone to blame. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 7 years settling between them. Victoria could hear the distant sounds of the city waking up, kids playing in the courtyard outside, the normal sounds of a world that had kept turning while she'd been trapped in her guilt. I tried to find you, she said finally. Years later, when I realized what I'd done. I hired investigators. I wanted to clear your name, to make it right somehow. When? 3 years ago. 4. I don't know exactly. Time started blurring together. I was drinking a lot then. David looked at her sharply. Drinking? I was pretty messed up for a while. The guilt was eating me alive. I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking about you, about what I'd done. I started drinking to sleep, then drinking to function, then just drinking. Are you sober now? 2 years. The pride in her voice was fragile but genuine. 2 years, 3 months, 16 days. What changed? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, remembering. I saw a news story about a man who'd been wrongly convicted of a crime, spent 15 years in prison before DNA evidence cleared him. And I thought about you, and I realized I was just another person who'd let an innocent man pay for something he didn't do. I couldn't live with that anymore. So you decided to find me. I decided to try to make amends. However I could. David was quiet, processing. Victoria could see the war playing out on his face, anger and hurt wrestling with something that might have been understanding. The investigators couldn't find you, she continued. David Martinez is a common name, and you'd disappeared. Changed your name, maybe. I don't know. But then I found this place, and I started volunteering because I thought maybe if I helped people like you, people who'd been hurt by the system, by people with power, maybe I could balance the scales somehow. And then I walked in. And then you walked in. Victoria's voice was barely audible. And I knew immediately. You look almost exactly the same. Just older. And I thought I was going to faint. David leaned against the workbench, his shoulders sagging. Why didn't you tell me right away? Because I'm a coward. The words came out flat, matter of fact. Because I was terrified you'd hate me. Because I was scared of losing the only good thing I'd found in years. What good thing? This. Victoria gestured around the workshop. This place. These kids. You. Working with you. Even though you didn't know who I was. It was the first time in years I felt like I might be worth something. David was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. I did change my name, he said quietly. Went back to my mother's maiden name. Rodriguez. I thought maybe if I became someone else, I could leave it all behind. Did it work? No. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. You can't outrun something like that. It follows you. I know. Do you? David's voice was sharper now. Do you really know? Because you got to go back to your penthouse and your money and your life. I had to rebuild everything from nothing. You're right. Victoria stood up, moving toward the door. You're absolutely right. I don't know. I can't know. And I'm sorry isn't enough. And trying to make amends isn't enough. And nothing I do will ever be enough. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. But I have to try. Even if you hate me. Even if you never forgive me. I have to try to make it right. Victoria. She turned back, tears streaming down her face. I need time, David said. I need to think about this. About what it means. About what comes next. I understand. Do you? Because I don't want to see you for a while. I don't want you here at the center. I need space to figure out how I feel about all of this. The words hit her like a physical blow, but she nodded. Okay. And Victoria? Yes. Thank you. For telling me. For finally telling me the truth. Victoria left the community center with tears streaming down her face. But for the first time in 7 years, she felt something like hope. The truth was out. The terrible, ugly truth was finally out, and somehow, the world hadn't ended. Now came the hard part, learning to live with the consequences. As she walked toward her car, she didn't see David watching from the workshop window, his own tears falling as he struggled with the terrible complexity of forgiveness, and the even more terrible possibility that some wounds might, against all odds, actually heal. 3 weeks passed without a word between them. Victoria honored David's request for space, but she couldn't bring herself to abandon the community center entirely. She found other ways to help, anonymous donations for supplies, paying for a new roof repair, funding a scholarship program for the kids. She told herself it wasn't about David, that she was helping the community, but the truth was simpler and more complicated. She couldn't let go of the only place where she'd felt genuinely useful. She was reviewing financial reports in her penthouse when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer. "Ms. Ashford." The voice was young, uncertain. "This is Marcus." From the center. Victoria's heart clenched. Marcus was one of the kids she'd worked with most closely. A 15-year-old with more anger than he knew what to do with and surprisingly gentle hands when it came to woodworking. "Marcus, hi. Is everything okay? It's Mr. Rodriguez. He's not doing so good." Victoria was already reaching for her keys. "What happened?" "He's been weird since you stopped coming. Like really weird. He barely talks to us anymore, just goes through the motions. And yesterday he didn't show up at all, which never happens. We went to check on him, and he was just sitting in his apartment, staring at the wall. Did he say anything?" "Just that he was tired. But it's not regular tired, you know? It's like he's given up or something." Victoria closed her eyes, guilt crashing over her in waves. "I'll be right there. Ms. Ashford, are you going to fix this? Because whatever happened between you two, it's messing with all of us. The center isn't the same without both of you." The line went dead, leaving Victoria staring at her phone. She'd thought giving David space was the right thing to do, but maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe some wounds needed tending, not abandoning. David's apartment was in a converted warehouse in Queens, the kind of building that had been gentrified just enough to be livable, but not enough to be expensive. Victoria stood outside his door for 10 minutes, gathering courage she wasn't sure she possessed. When she finally knocked, there was no answer. She tried again, louder this time. "David, it's me." Marcus called. "I'm worried about you." Silence. "I'm not leaving," she said to the door. "I'll sit out here all night if I have to." She heard movement inside, then the sound of multiple locks disengaging. The door opened just wide enough for her to see David's face. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes he'd had on 3 weeks ago. "You look like hell," she said. "Feel worse." His voice was rough and used. "What do you want?" "To talk. To make sure you're okay." "I'm fine." "No, you're not." Victoria pushed past him into the apartment, ignoring his protests. The space was small but had been carefully maintained, until recently. Now it was chaos. Empty bottles covered the coffee table, takeout containers overflowed from the trash, and the air was stale with the smell of unwashed dishes and defeat. "Jesus, David. Don't." He closed the door, leaning against it. "Don't act like you care. You got what you wanted. You confessed, cleared your conscience. Now you can move on. Is that what you think? That I told you to make myself feel better? Didn't you?" Victoria looked around the apartment, taking in the destruction. "When I was drinking, my place looked like this. Maybe worse. I'd sit in my own filth for days, ordering food I wouldn't eat, buying things I didn't need, just trying to fill the empty space where my soul used to be. I'm not drinking." "No, but you're drowning just the same." David laughed bitterly. "You think you know me now. Because you ruined my life, you think you understand what I'm going through." "I think I understand guilt." Victoria moved toward the kitchen, starting to clear away the mess. "I think I understand what it feels like to hate yourself so much that you can't function." "Stop." David grabbed her wrist, stopping her mid-motion. "Stop cleaning up after me. Stop trying to fix things. You don't get to waltz in here and play savior. Then what do you want from me?" Victoria turned to face him, close enough now to see the pain etched in every line of his face. "Tell me what you want, and I'll do it. You want me to disappear? Fine. You want me to publicly confess what I did? I'll do it. You want me to give you everything I own? It's yours. I want my life back." The words came out raw, broken. "I want my wife back. I want my daughter to look at me like I'm her hero instead of a stranger. I want to go to sleep at night without wondering if I'm fundamentally broken somehow, if there's something about me that invites disaster." Victoria's heart shattered. "David, but I can't have any of that. So I don't know what I want from you. I don't know what I want from anyone." They stood there in the wreckage of his apartment, two people destroyed by the same lie, trying to figure out how to breathe in the aftermath of truth. "The kids miss you," Victoria said finally. "The kids will be fine." "No, they won't." Marcus is acting out again, crying in the bathroom when he thinks no one's looking. And Sarah hasn't spoken to anyone since you stopped coming. They need you. They need someone who isn't broken. They need someone who understands what it's like to be broken. Victoria moved closer, her voice gentle. These kids, they've all been hurt. They've all been let down by adults who were supposed to protect them. You think they need someone perfect? They need someone who knows what it's like to have your world fall apart and still get up the next day. David's shoulders sagged. I don't know if I can get up anymore. Yes, you can. Victoria's voice was firm now. Because you have for 7 years. Because you rebuilt your life from nothing. Because you turned your pain into something beautiful. That workshop, those kids, the way you teach them that their hands can create instead of destroy. I only did that because I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. You could have stayed bitter. You could have given up completely. But you didn't. You chose to heal, even when it was hard. David looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Why do you care what happens to me? The question hung between them, loaded with 7 years of history and pain. Victoria took a shaky breath. Because I think I'm falling in love with you. The words escaped before she could stop them, raw and honest and terrifying. David's eyes widened, and Victoria immediately backpedaled. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I know it's impossible. I know you could never. Victoria, I just meant that these past few weeks, working with you, seeing who you are, you're nothing like what I imagined. You're kind and patient and funny, and you see the best in people even when they can't see it themselves. And I know I don't deserve to feel this way about you. I know I have no right. Victoria. What? I think I might be falling in love with you too. The admission hung in the air between them, impossible and undeniable. Victoria felt her knees go weak. But I don't know what to do with that, David continued. I don't know how to love someone who destroyed my life. I don't know how to trust someone who lied to me for weeks. I don't know how to build something real on a foundation of lies and pain. Maybe we don't build on the foundation, Victoria said quietly. Maybe we clear it away completely and start from scratch. Is that possible? I don't know, but I'd like to try. If you'll let me. David was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. The kids really miss me? They're falling apart without you. The center isn't the same. And you? Do you miss me? Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. Every day. Every moment. I miss working beside you. Miss the way you explain things to the kids. Miss the way you hum while you sandwood. I miss feeling like I might be worth something. You are worth something. Not without you. Not without this. She gestured around the apartment. Not without the possibility that maybe somehow we could find a way to heal each other. David closed his eyes, and Victoria could see the war playing out on his face. Hope battling with fear, love wrestling with logic. I need to shower, he said finally. And shave. And probably eat something that isn't from a takeout container. Okay. And then maybe we could go to the center. See how the kids are doing. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. I'd like that. This doesn't fix anything, David said, his voice careful. This doesn't erase what happened or make it okay. I know. And I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you. I know. But maybe we can try. Maybe we can see if there's something here worth saving. Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. David disappeared into the bathroom, and she heard the shower start. While he cleaned up, she tackled the apartment, clearing away the debris of his breakdown. It felt like penance, like prayer, like the first tentative steps toward something that might, eventually, resemble redemption. When they arrived at the community center an hour later, Marcus took one look at them and grinned. About time, he said. We've got work to do. And for the first time in weeks, Victoria felt like she might actually be home. For 2 months, they built something fragile and beautiful. Victoria and David fell into a rhythm at the community center, arriving early, staying late, working side by side with an easy intimacy that surprised them both. The kids noticed the change immediately. Marcus stopped picking fights. Sarah started talking again. Even the newest arrivals, the ones who came in angry and broken, seemed to soften faster under their combined attention. Victoria learned to read David's moods, to know when he needed space to process a difficult memory and when he needed her presence to anchor him. David learned to recognize Victoria's guilt spirals, to pull her back when she started drowning in self-recrimination. They were careful with each other, gentle, like people handling something precious and breakable. Which is why the morning everything shattered started like any other. Victoria was teaching a group of younger kids how to measure twice and cut once when her phone buzzed. She ignored it, focused on guiding 10-year-old Jasmine's uncertain hands as she marked her first piece of wood. The phone buzzed again. And again. "Go ahead," David said, looking up from where he was helping Marcus with a complex joint. "I've got this." Victoria stepped outside into the crisp October air, pulling out her phone. 17 missed calls from her lawyer, Richard Carmichael. Her stomach dropped. "Richard, what's?" "Victoria, where the hell are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours." "I'm at the center." "What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" Richard's voice was sharp with panic. "What's wrong is that there's a reporter from the New York Times sitting in my office asking questions about a theft that happened at your father's house 7 years ago. What's wrong is that someone leaked the story, and it's going to be front page tomorrow morning." The world tilted. Victoria gripped the phone tighter, fighting to stay upright. "What story? What are you talking about?" "The Martinez case. The handyman your father had arrested for theft. Except now there are questions about whether he actually did it. The reporter has sources claiming you might have lied about the whole thing." Victoria's blood turned to ice. "Who told them?" "I don't know, but they have details. Specific details about your father's reaction, about the investigation, about Martinez's family situation. This isn't some fishing expedition, Victoria. Someone with intimate knowledge of the case is talking." "Richard, You need to get down here right now. We need to craft a response before this thing explodes. If they can prove you perjured yourself, if they can show you knowingly sent an innocent man to jail." "He wasn't arrested," Victoria said weakly. "He was just fired. He was investigated for felony theft. The only reason he wasn't charged was because your father decided not to press charges. But if the story breaks that you lied, that changes everything. The statute of limitations might not have run out on perjury charges." Victoria's legs gave out. She sank onto the front steps of the center, staring blindly at the street. "How bad is it?" "Bad. Very bad. The reporter is talking about a front-page exposé on wealthy families using their influence to scapegoat working-class people. He's positioning this as a broader story about privilege and power, with your case as the centerpiece." "I have to tell David." "What?" "No. Absolutely not. You don't tell anyone anything until we figure out our strategy. Richard, he's here. He's been working with me. He doesn't know that He's there? Jesus Christ, Victoria. Please tell me you haven't been stupid enough to get involved with this man." Victoria's silence was answer enough. "God damn it. This is a disaster. You need to get away from him immediately. No contact until we figure out how to handle this. I can't just disappear. You can and you will. I'll send a car. Be ready in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Victoria stared at her phone, her mind reeling. Someone had leaked the story. Someone knew about her lie, about David, about everything. But who? She stood on shaking legs, trying to compose herself before going back inside. Through the window, she could see David laughing at something Marcus had said, his face open and relaxed in a way she'd never seen during their first weeks together. He looked happy, at peace. She was about to destroy that forever. Victoria pushed through the doors, her face carefully blank. "David, can I speak with you for a moment?" He looked up, immediately alert to the tension in her voice. "Everything okay? I need to leave. Something's come up." "What kind of something?" Victoria glanced around the workshop, at the kids who were watching their interaction with the intuitive awareness of young people who'd learned to read adult moods for survival. "Can we talk outside?" David followed her out, his expression growing more concerned with each step. "Victoria, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have to go away for a while." "Go away where?" "I don't know. My lawyer is handling some things, and I need to be available." "What kind of things?" Victoria couldn't meet his eyes. "Legal things. Business things. It's complicated." "How long?" "I don't know." David was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "This is about us, isn't it? About what happened between us. You're getting scared, so you're running." "No, that's not. Because if you need time to think, if this is moving too fast, we can slow down. We can take a step back." David, it's not about us. Then what is it about? Victoria opened her mouth to tell him, to explain about the reporter and the story and the disaster that was about to engulf them both. But the words wouldn't come. How could she explain that just when they'd found something beautiful, just when they'd started to heal, her past was about to destroy everything again? I just need some space, she said instead. David's face hardened. Space. Yes. Like the space you needed when you were lying to me about who you were? That's not. Or the space you needed when you were deciding whether to tell me the truth about what you'd done. David, please. No. His voice was cold now, the warmth she'd grown to love replaced by bitter familiarity. I know what this is. This is you deciding that slumming it with the damaged handyman was fun for a while, but now it's time to get back to your real life. That's not true, isn't it? Because this is exactly what people like you do. You play at caring, you play at being different, but when things get complicated, you run back to your penthouse and your lawyers and your money. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. David, I'm trying to protect you. From what? From me. From what's about to happen. From the mess I'm about to make of both our lives. What mess? What are you talking about? Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Car is outside. Move. Now. I have to go. Victoria, don't do this. Don't run away from us. There is no us. The words came out harsher than she intended, and she saw David flinch as if she'd struck him. There was never going to be an US. I was kidding myself, and I was kidding you. That's not true. It is true. You said it yourself. You can't build something real on a foundation of lies and pain. Well, that's all we have. That's all we'll ever have. David stared at her, his face cycling through hurt, anger, and something that looked like recognition. You're right. I did say that. David. And I was right. This was never going to work. I was stupid to think it could. You weren't stupid. Yes, I was. I was stupid to think that someone like you could actually care about someone like me. I was stupid to think that rich people can change, that they can actually see past their own privilege long enough to give a damn about the people they hurt. Each word was a knife. Victoria felt herself bleeding, but she couldn't stop him. She deserved this. I was stupid to think that you telling me the truth meant anything other than you trying to clear your conscience. I was stupid to think that you working at the center meant anything other than you playing at being a good person. David, stop. I was stupid to think that you could love me. The words hung between them, devastating in their finality. Victoria felt something break inside her chest, something that might never heal. I do love you, she whispered. No, you don't. You love the idea of me. You love the story you tell yourself about redemption and forgiveness and second chances. But you don't love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't be running. A black car pulled up to the curb. Victoria's ride. I have to go. Then go. Victoria started toward the car, then stopped. David, when this all comes out, and it will come out, I want you to know that these past few months, working with you, falling in love with you, it was the only real thing I've ever felt. The only time I've ever felt like I might be worth something. Don't. I need you to know that. I need you to know that whatever happens next, these months with you were the best of my life. She got in the car without looking back. As they pulled away from the curb, she saw David standing on the front steps of the community center, his hands clenched into fists, his face a mask of devastation and rage. Inside the center, Marcus pressed his face to the window, watching the car disappear down the street. She's not coming back, is she? He asked David when the older man finally came inside. David looked around the workshop, at the projects Victoria had started, at the supplies she'd bought, at the spaces where her presence had become as natural as breathing. No, he said quietly. She's not coming back. Why not? David didn't answer. He couldn't explain what he didn't understand himself. All he knew was that Victoria had done what people like her always did. She'd taken what she needed and left when things got complicated. The worst part was that he'd actually believed she was different. The worst part was that he'd actually believed she loved him. The worst part was that he'd actually believed he could love her back. 3 hours later, David's phone buzzed with a news alert. Wealth and lies. How a Manhattan socialite destroyed a working man's life. The story was everything Richard had warned Victoria about and worse. It painted her as a spoiled, privileged woman who'd callously destroyed an innocent man's life to save herself. It included details about David's lost marriage, his financial ruin, his near suicide. It positioned the case as a symbol of everything wrong with wealth and privilege in America. But the worst part, the part that made David's blood run cold, was the final paragraph. Sources close to the investigation report that Ashford has recently been seen volunteering at a Queens community center where Martinez now works, leading to speculation about whether her presence there represents genuine remorse or a calculated attempt to manipulate the narrative. Martinez could not be reached for comment. David stared at the article until the words blurred together. Then he threw his phone against the wall, watching it shatter into pieces. Just like everything else in his life. Just like his stupid, naive heart. The media storm hit with the force of a hurricane. Victoria's penthouse became a fortress under siege. Reporters camped outside her building, camera crews lined the sidewalk, and her doorman had to escort her through a gauntlet of shouted questions every time she dared to venture out. The story had legs: wealth, privilege, a destroyed working-class family, and now the tantalizing possibility of a secret relationship between the woman and her victim. She'd fired Richard after their third screaming match about strategy. He wanted her to deny everything, to claim the story was fabricated, to use her family's influence to bury it. Victoria wanted something he couldn't give her, a way to make it right that didn't destroy David all over again. Now she sat alone in her living room, scrolling through the comments on the Times article. They were brutal, creative in their hatred, and probably deserved. She'd become a symbol, the entitled rich woman who'd rather destroy a poor man than face consequences for her actions. The irony wasn't lost on her that they were right, even if they didn't know the full story. Her phone had been ringing constantly for 3 days. Talk show producers, documentary filmmakers, book agents. Everyone wanted her story. The vultures were circling, and Victoria felt like roadkill. The worst part was the silence from David. She'd tried calling him 12 times, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She'd driven to the community center twice, but the building was locked up tight, a handwritten sign on the door reading, "Closed until further notice." She destroyed everything. Again, Victoria poured herself a glass of wine, then stared at it for a long moment before pouring it down the sink. 2 years, 3 months, and 23 days sober. She wasn't going to break that streak now, no matter how much she wanted to disappear into the bottom of a bottle. Her laptop chimed with an email from an address she didn't recognize. She almost deleted it. Her inbox was full of hate mail and interview requests, but something made her click it open. "Ms. Ashford, my name is Isabel Martinez. I think you knew my father." Victoria's breath caught. She read the message 3 times before the words sank in. "I live in San Francisco now. I'm 22, graduated from Berkeley last year, work at a tech company. I have a good life. But I've been following the news about you and my dad, and I think there are things you need to know. My parents got divorced when I was 12. My mom told me it was because my dad had been caught stealing from a client, that she couldn't trust him anymore. I believed her. I was 12 and scared, and I believed her. I barely spoke to my dad for years. When he tried to call, I'd make excuses. When he sent letters, I'd throw them away. I thought he was a criminal. I thought he was a liar. I thought he was weak. It wasn't until college that I started to question things. My dad never stopped trying to reach out, never stopped sending birthday cards, never stopped telling me he loved me. That didn't seem like the behavior of a guilty person. Last year, I hired a private investigator. I needed to know the truth. What I found out, it broke my heart. My dad never stole anything. He was fired based on a lie, and it destroyed our family. I flew to New York to see him 2 months ago. We talked for 12 hours straight. He told me about his work at the community center, about how he'd found purpose again helping kids. He told me about a woman who'd been volunteering there, someone who understood guilt and redemption. He didn't tell me it was you. He didn't tell me you were the one who'd lied about him. But he talked about you like you were someone special. Someone who'd brought light back into his life. I'm not writing to forgive you. I'm not writing to condemn you. I'm writing because my father is the best man I know, and for the first time in 7 years, I'd seen him happy. Really happy. And now that's gone. He's not answering his phone. The community center is closed. The kids who relied on him have nowhere to go. You didn't just destroy his life 7 years ago. You're destroying it again right now. I don't know what happened between you two, but I know my father. He doesn't give up on people. If he's given up on you, it's because you gave up first. Fix this. Whatever it takes, fix this. Those kids need him. And I think he needs you. Isabel. Victoria stared at the email until her vision blurred. David's daughter. The little girl whose father had been torn away from her by Victoria's lie. The daughter who'd spent years thinking her father was a criminal. She closed her laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the circus of reporters below. They wanted a story. They wanted drama and scandal and spectacle. But what they really wanted was accountability. Victoria had spent 7 years running from consequences. She'd spent the last 3 days hiding from the truth. But Isabel was right. Running away wasn't fixing anything. It was just creating more destruction. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd memorized but never called. WNBC News, this is Jennifer Chun. Ms. Chun, this is Victoria Ashford. I believe you've been trying to reach me. Ms. Ashford. Yes, we've been hoping to get your side of the story. Are you ready to give an interview? I'm ready to tell the truth. Underscore 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 underscore. Meanwhile, across the city, David sat in his dark apartment, staring at the wall. He hadn't showered in 3 days, hadn't eaten anything but crackers and peanut butter, hadn't answered his phone or checked his email. The community center had been closed since the story broke. The board thought it was best to let things cool down before reopening. The kids had been calling constantly. Marcus had shown up at his door twice, demanding to know when they were going back to work. Sarah had left a voicemail that made him cry. Just her small voice asking if he was okay, if he was coming back, if she'd done something wrong. But David couldn't face them. Couldn't face their questions, their confusion, their trust. Because the truth was, he didn't know what was real anymore. Had Victoria actually cared about him? Had she actually cared about the kids? Or had it all been some elaborate performance? A wealthy woman playing at redemption while calculating how to manage the narrative when the truth came out? The worst part was that he'd believed her when she said she loved him. He'd believed it so completely that he'd started to love her back. For the first time in 7 years, he'd allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he could have something good again. And then she'd run. Just like everyone else in his life had run when things got complicated. David's phone buzzed with yet another call from Marcus. He let it go to voicemail, but something made him pick up the phone and listen to the message. Mr. Rodriguez, it's Marcus. I know you're in there, and I know you're hurting. But Sarah's been crying for 3 days, and Jasmine keeps asking when Ms. Victoria is coming back, and I don't know what to tell them. A pause, then. Look, I don't know what happened between you two, but I know what I saw. I saw the way she looked at you, like you were the most important person in the world. I saw the way she was with us kids, like we actually mattered. That wasn't fake. I've seen fake my whole life. Fake social workers, fake foster parents, fake people who pretend to care until it gets inconvenient. Ms. Victoria wasn't fake. Another pause. Maybe she screwed up. Maybe she hurt you. But people screw up. People hurt each other. That doesn't mean they don't care. That doesn't mean they don't love you. David closed his eyes, Marcus's words hitting him like physical blows. The center needs you, Mr. Rodriguez. We all need you. But maybe you need us too. Maybe you need to stop hiding and start fighting for the good things in your life. The message ended. David stared at his phone, thinking about the past 3 days. About the silence and the isolation and the familiar taste of despair. About how easy it was to sink back into the darkness he'd lived in for so long. But then he thought about Marcus's laugh when he'd successfully completed his first mortise and tenon joint. About Sarah's shy smile when she'd shown him her finished jewelry box. About Jasmine's fierce concentration as she'd learned to use a chisel. About Victoria's hands over his as she'd helped him guide a nervous kid through a difficult cut. About the way she'd looked at him when she'd said she loved him, like he was a miracle instead of a mistake. David stood up, walked to his bathroom, and looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like he'd given up. He looked like he'd let the darkness win. But maybe Marcus was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding and start fighting. He turned on the shower and began to clean himself up. He had a community center to reopen, kids to help, and a life to rebuild. Again. And maybe, if he was very lucky, a woman to forgive. Underscore 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 underscore. The WNBC studio was smaller than Victoria had expected, but the lights were just as bright and harsh as she'd feared. Jennifer Chin sat across from her, perfectly composed, while Victoria tried to keep her hands from shaking. "We're live in 30 seconds, the producer called out. Victoria closed her eyes, thinking about Isabel's email, about David's face when she'd walked away from him, about the kids at the center who were suffering because of her choices. "And we're live in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, I'm Jennifer Chin, and this is a special edition of NYC Tonight. I'm here with Victoria Ashford, the Manhattan socialite at the center of a growing scandal about wealth, privilege, and the destruction of a working-class family. Ms. Ashford, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me. Let's start with the basic question everyone wants answered. Did you lie about David Martinez stealing from your family 7 years ago?" Victoria looked directly into the camera, imagining David watching from his apartment, imagining the kids from the center, imagining Isabel in San Francisco. "Yes," she said simply. "I lied. David Martinez never stole anything from me or my family. He was innocent, and I destroyed his life to protect myself." Jennifer leaned forward. "Why? Why would you do something like that?" "Because I was 22 years old, I was being abused by my father, and I was desperate." Victoria's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "I had been stealing small amounts of money to save up to run away, and when my father discovered money was missing, I panicked. I saw David as an easy target, someone no one would believe over me. You've been volunteering at a community center in Queens where Mr. Martinez works. Was that part of some plan to manipulate the narrative?" "No." Victoria's voice was firm. "I started volunteering there because I was looking for David. I wanted to make amends. I wanted to try to undo some of the damage I'd caused." "But you didn't tell him who you were initially?" "No. I was a coward. I was afraid he'd hate me, afraid he'd want nothing to do with me." "And when you did tell him the truth?" Victoria paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "He was devastated, furious, hurt beyond measure. But he tried to forgive me. We tried to build something together. Something real. Past tense. When I learned that the story was about to break, I panicked again. I left without explaining, thinking I was protecting him. But I was just protecting myself. Again." Jennifer studied her for a moment. "What do you want people to know about David Martinez?" "I want them to know that he's the best man I've ever met." Victoria's voice broke slightly. "I want them to know that despite everything I put him through, he rebuilt his life. He found a way to turn his pain into something beautiful. He helps kids who have been hurt, who have been abandoned, who have been written off by the world. He sees potential in people that others miss." "And what do you want to say to him?" Victoria looked directly into the camera, tears streaming down her face. "I want to say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for lying about you 7 years ago. I'm sorry for not being brave enough to tell you the truth from the beginning. I'm sorry for running away when you needed me to stay and fight." Her voice grew stronger. "I want to say that I love you. I love your kindness, your patience, your strength. I love the way you see the best in people, even when they don't deserve it. I love the way you've turned your pain into purpose. And if he's watching, I want him to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. I'm going to clear his name publicly, legally, completely. I'm going to fund scholarships for kids like the ones at the center. I'm going to use my privilege to help people instead of hurt them." Victoria wiped her eyes. "And I want him to know that these past few months, working beside him, falling in love with him, have been the most real, most meaningful months of my life. If he can't forgive me, I understand. But I need him to know that he changed me. He made me want to be better. What's next for you?" "I'm going to keep trying to earn forgiveness, even if it takes the rest of my life. I'm going to keep trying to be the person David saw in me, even if he never wants to see me again." Victoria looked into the camera one more time. "And to the kids at the center, Marcus, Sarah, Jasmine, all of you, I want you to know that you matter. You're not forgotten. And Mr. Rodriguez, he's going to come back. He's going to keep fighting for you, because that's who he is. That's who he's always been." The interview ended, and Victoria sat in the bright studio lights, feeling strangely lighter. She'd told the truth. Finally, completely, publicly. She'd laid her heart bare for the world to see. Now all she could do was wait and see if it was enough. If she was enough. If love was enough to bridge the chasm she'd created between them. The answer, she knew, was entirely up to David. David watched the interview from his couch, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. He'd turned on the television, expecting to see Victoria make excuses, to watch her use her wealth and privilege to minimize what she'd done. Instead, he watched her strip herself bare before the entire city, admitting everything, defending nothing about herself, and defending everything about him. When she looked into the camera and said she loved him, David felt something break open in his chest. Not the painful shattering he'd experienced over the past few days, but something softer, like ice thawing after a long winter. His phone started ringing immediately after the interview ended. Reporters, friends, even his brother calling from Phoenix. But David ignored them all. He had somewhere he needed to be. 20 minutes later, he stood outside the community center, keys in hand. The building had been locked for 4 days, the longest it had been closed since he'd started working there. Through the windows, he could see the projects the kids had left behind. Marcus's half-finished bookshelf, Sarah's jewelry box waiting for its final coat of stain, Jasmine's birdhouse that needed only the roof attached. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar smell of wood and possibility. This place had saved him once. Maybe it could save him again. David flipped on the lights and started setting up the workshop. He arranged tools, swept sawdust, organized supplies. Muscle memory took over, and for the first time in days, he felt like himself again. He was testing a sander when he heard the front door open. "Mr. Rodriguez?" Marcus's voice echoed through the building. "You in here?" "Workshop," David called back. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his usual swagger replaced by something more vulnerable. "You okay?" "I'm getting there." "Good. Because Sarah's been crying, and Jasmine keeps asking when you're coming back, and honestly, I've been worried sick about you." David set down the sander and really looked at Marcus, this 15-year-old kid who'd been bounced between foster homes, who'd learned not to trust adults, who'd somehow decided that David was worth worrying about. "I'm sorry," David said. "I shouldn't have disappeared on you guys." "Yeah, well, adults disappear. It's what they do." Marcus shrugged, but David could see the hurt underneath. "I just thought maybe you were different." "I am different. Or I'm trying to be." David pulled out his phone. "Help me call everyone. Tell them we're back open." Marcus's face lit up. "Really? Really? But first, I need to tell you something. About Ms. Victoria." Marcus's expression grew guarded. "What about her?" "She's the one who lied about me. 7 years ago. She's the reason I lost everything." Marcus stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. But she cared about us. About you. I saw it." "I know. That's what makes it complicated." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing. "Did you watch the interview?" "You saw it. Everyone saw it. It's all over social media. She basically destroyed herself to clear your name." David nodded. "She did. So what happens now?" "I don't know. But I know the center opens tomorrow, and you kids need a place to come. That's what matters right now." Marcus studied his face. "You still love her?" It wasn't a question, but David answered anyway. "Yeah, I do." "Then maybe you should do something about it." Before David could respond, his phone rang. Isabel's name appeared on the screen. "That's my daughter," he told Marcus. "I should take this." "Dad." Isabel's voice was tight with emotion. "I saw the interview. I saw what she said about you." "Isabel." "I wrote to her. Yesterday. I told her she needed to fix what she'd broken." David closed his eyes. "You what?" "I've been angry at her for years without even knowing it. Angry at this nameless person who'd taken my father away from me. But then I met you again, and I saw how you'd rebuilt your life, how you'd found purpose, and I realized I realized I'd been wrong about so many things. Honey, she loves you, Dad. It was obvious in everything she said. And you love her too, don't you? David looked at Marcus, who was pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. It's complicated. Love is always complicated. But that doesn't mean it's not worth fighting for. She lied to me, Isabel. She destroyed our family. She was a scared kid who made a terrible mistake. And she spent the last 7 years trying to make it right. Dad, I lost so much time with you because I was too proud to forgive. Don't make the same mistake. David felt tears prick his eyes. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. Isabel's voice was soft. A father who never gave up on me, even when I gave up on him. A father who taught me that everyone deserves a second chance. After David hung up, he and Marcus worked in comfortable silence, preparing the workshop for tomorrow's return. Other kids started trickling in, Sarah with her quiet smile, Jasmine with her boundless energy, a few others who'd heard the news that the center was reopening. Are you going to forgive her? Sarah asked suddenly, looking up from the jewelry box she'd returned to working on. I don't know, David answered honestly. My mom used to say that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what someone did. It's about choosing not to let it keep hurting you. David stared at this 13-year-old girl who'd been through more trauma than most adults, who'd somehow found wisdom in her pain. Your mom sounds like she was a smart woman. She was. She also said that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who love us the most. They just don't know how to show it right. David worked late that night, long after the kids had gone home. He was putting the finishing touches on a chair he'd been building when he heard the front door open again. We're closed, he called out, not looking up from his work. I know. Victoria's voice stopped him cold. He turned to find her standing in the doorway of the workshop, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater. No makeup, no jewelry, no armor of wealth and privilege. How did you get in? Marcus gave me his key. Said I should come talk to you. Smart kid. They all are. You've done something beautiful here. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything between them filling the space. I saw the interview, David said finally. I meant every word. I know. He set down his tools, turning to face her fully. The question is, what happens now? Victoria stepped into the workshop, moving carefully, as if she expected him to tell her to leave at any moment. I've been thinking about that. About what comes next. She paused near his workbench, running her fingers along the smooth wood. I want to set up a foundation. In your name. For kids like the ones here. Kids who need someone to believe in them. Victoria. I want to pay for college scholarships, trade school, whatever they need. I want to fund community centers, like this one across the city. I want to use my money for something good for once. That's not what I meant. I know. She looked at him directly for the first time since entering the workshop. You meant what happens with us. Yeah, that's what I meant. Victoria took a shaky breath. I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love your kindness, your strength, the way you see potential in broken things and make them beautiful again. Victoria, but I also know that love isn't enough. Not by itself. I know that I hurt you in ways that might never heal. I know that I lied to you, betrayed your trust, ran away when you needed me most. David watched her struggle with the words, saw the pain etched in every line of her face. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she continued. I know I don't deserve another chance. But I'm asking for one anyway. Not because I've earned it, but because I promised to spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. And if I can't give you that chance, then I'll still set up the foundation. I'll still try to make amends. I'll still work every day to be the person you saw in me, even if you never want to see me again. David was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Do you know what I thought about during those 3 days when I was hiding in my apartment? Victoria shook her head. I thought about how easy it was to fall back into that darkness. How familiar it felt to give up, to let the bitterness win. I thought about how I'd been living in that darkness for years before I found this place, before I found purpose again. He moved closer to her, close enough to see the tears she was trying to hold back. And then I thought about these past few months. About how different everything felt with you here. How the kids laughed more, how I laughed more. How for the first time in 7 years, I felt like maybe I could have something good again. David, I thought about the way you looked at me when you said you loved me. Like I was a miracle instead of a mistake. And I realized something. Victoria waited, barely breathing. I realized that I have a choice. I can choose to let what happened 7 years ago define the rest of my life. Or I can choose to build something new. Something better. What are you saying? David reached out, gently taking her hands in his. I'm saying that you're not the same person who lied about me 7 years ago. I'm not the same person who lost everything because of that lie. We're both different now. We're both trying to be better. So what does that mean? It means that I forgive you. The words came out quietly, but they carried the weight of 7 years of pain and the promise of whatever came next. Not because you've earned it, but because I choose to. Because I choose to believe that people can change, that love can grow in the ashes of betrayal, that second chances are possible. Victoria broke down completely then, sobbing against his chest as he held her. They stood there in the workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects and dreams of kids who'd been given second chances, and they held each other like people who'd been drowning and had finally found solid ground. I love you too, David whispered into her hair. I love you despite everything that happened, because of everything that happened. I love who you are now, who you're trying to become. What happens now? Victoria asked, her voice muffled against his shirt. Now we figure it out. Together. We help these kids, we build something beautiful, we learn to trust each other again. We take it one day at a time. And if we mess up, then we try again. And again. Until we get it right. Victoria pulled back to look at him, her face streaked with tears, but somehow radiant. I want to get it right. With you. With us. Me too. David kissed her then, soft and careful and full of promise. It tasted like forgiveness and hope and the possibility of healing. It tasted like home. When they broke apart, Victoria noticed something on his workbench. A small wooden box, beautifully crafted, with delicate hinges and a smooth finish. What's that? David smiled, a little embarrassed. I was making it for you. Before everything exploded. I was going to give it to you for your birthday. It's beautiful. It's a jewelry box. I thought maybe you could keep something precious in it. Victoria opened the box, revealing the rich wood interior lined with soft fabric. What would I keep in it? I don't know. Maybe this. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden heart, carved with infinite care and sanded to silk smoothness. I made this the day after you told me you loved me. I was going to give it to you with the box, but then I ruined everything. Then life got complicated. David took the wooden heart and placed it gently in the box. But maybe complicated isn't the same as ruined. Victoria picked up the heart, running her thumb over its smooth surface. What does it mean? It means that even when everything else falls apart, this remains. What we built together, what we feel for each other, what we choose to create going forward. It means that love is stronger than lies, that forgiveness is possible, that second chances are real. And if I keep it, then you're choosing to believe in us. In the possibility that two broken people can help each other heal. In the possibility that the worst things that happen to us don't have to define us. Victoria closed the box carefully, holding it against her chest. I choose to believe. Good. Because I have a community center to run, and I could use some help. What kind of help? The kind that involves getting here early, staying late, and putting up with Marcus's terrible jokes. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I think I can handle that. And Victoria? Yeah. Welcome home. 6 months later, the David Martinez Community Center was thriving. The foundation Victoria had established was funding similar centers across the city, providing opportunities for kids who'd been forgotten by the system. Marcus had been accepted to a prestigious trade school program. Sarah was planning to study art therapy in college. Jasmine had been placed with a loving foster family who encouraged her creativity. And on a warm spring evening, as David and Victoria worked side by side in the workshop, teaching a new group of kids how to turn raw wood into something beautiful, they looked at each other and knew they'd found something rare and precious. A love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. A trust that had been broken and carefully rebuilt. A second chance that had been earned through patience and grace. The lies of the past had been transformed into the truth of the present. And that truth was simple. Love, forgiveness, and the courage to begin again could heal even the deepest wounds. Some things they'd learned were worth the wait. Some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth believing in, even when, especially when they seemed impossible. Their love was one of those things. Sometimes the heaviest chains are the ones we forge ourselves. Victoria's lie didn't just destroy David's life, it imprisoned her own soul for 7 years. But here's the question that haunts us all. Is there ever a point where it's too late to make things right? Can love really grow from the ashes of betrayal? Drop a comment below and tell me, would you be able to forgive someone who destroyed your life? And if you were Victoria, would you have the courage to confess the truth, knowing it could cost you everything? Hit that subscribe button if you believe in the power of redemption, and ring the bell so you never miss a story that reminds us all that healing is possible, even from the deepest wounds.